All right, happening right now, House lawmakers coming together to kick off the 119th congressional session, but not without a little drama. Moments from now, Republicans will cast their vote for who they want to lead their party under the Trump administration. House Speaker Mike Johnson now battling to hold his position among GOP leaders today. Now, Johnson has no room for error here. Republicans currently have a single-digit majority in the House, and at least one congressman already said he will vote against Johnson. A handful more went into today's session undecided. Now, the House Speaker had a message for those still unsure about the vote. Let's take a listen to that.
I'm talking with all members and telling them we need to unify so that we can move the Trump agenda. This election is not just about one person. It's about moving forward with the America First agenda. The mandate was given by the American people, by the electorate. President Trump got 77 million votes. The House Republicans got almost 75 million. It's a record number. They are expecting us to get to work, and we don't have time for drama. So my simple message to my colleagues is make suggestions about process improvements. We're open to that at all times, but I don't make deals with anyone. There's no quid pro quo here. I don't do anything in exchange for a vote other than commit to make this institution work as effectively and efficiently as possible.
No time for drama, easier said than done. We have our team covering today's vote from all angles. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is in West Palm Beach following the Trump reaction to all this. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, let's bring in CBS News political reporter Taurean Small from Capitol Hill. Taurean, thanks for being with us. The House convening right now for a new session of Congress. Walk us through what we can expect to see ahead of the House Speaker vote.
Well, Liz, procedurally, we can expect to see nominating speeches for both Mike Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries within the hour, really. That's, of course, really lay of the land here as it goes to these speakership battles. They have their supporters come out first, give these nominating speeches before a vote happens. As we've seen happen before, we can also hear other nominating speeches for other members, not the two major leaders for those parties' conferences here. And then after that, a vote will happen. Now, politically, what we can expect to see is some Republicans mull at the idea of supporting Johnson. As you mentioned, he already has a no from Thomas Massie. Chip Roy is another Republican who we're watching who has been pretty vocal about his non-support and non-committal to supporting Johnson's re-election bid for Speaker. He only has one vote that he can afford to lose because of this very narrow majority that Republicans have going into this Congress. If that happens, he has to decide whether or not he wants to go through the excruciating process of seeking another round of votes. Just to remind you, his predecessor, Kevin McCarthy, went through 15 rounds before he was finally able to grab the gavel.
Yeah, we all remember that, Taurean. So what are the biggest concerns among those who do not want to see Johnson with the gavel again?
Well, a lot of Republicans, I probably shouldn't say a lot, a good amount of Republicans were unhappy with his handling of the two stopgap bills that under his speakership went through Congress both in September and in December. At the same time that he was trying to avoid a government shutdown, he had the leader of his party, Donald Trump, telling Republicans not to support it, to shut down the government in order to get his agenda or some of his asks through early, before he takes office. That didn't happen, obviously, and he had to work with Democrats in order to get that done. So Republicans, some aren't too happy about that. Other Republicans are asking for things. Chip Roy of the House Freedom Caucus is looking to be chair of the House Rules Committee. Mike Johnson has said, as we heard there, that he's not trying to do a quid pro quo. He doesn't think that he needs to exchange something for members' votes, as we saw Kevin McCarthy do when it comes to changes to the rules in order to appease some in his party who were unhappy with him. That ultimately bid him where he didn't want to be bidden and ultimately led to him being ousted. So Johnson is facing that consequence potentially if he doesn't make it through round one.
All right, Taurean Small, thanks so much for that. All right, let's bring in Ed O'Keefe from West Palm Beach. That's very close to Mar-a-Lago there in Florida. Ed, several scenarios at play here. Can you walk us through the possible outcomes?
Well, the obvious one is that Speaker Johnson is elected. It'll be narrow because the margins between Republicans and Democrats are narrow in the House, but a win is a win. And that would probably be the biggest, obvious, most easy and welcomed result of this afternoon. Nobody, of course, is committing clearly that he has the votes because these are pretty fluid situations. What we're seeing them do right now on the House floor is literally take attendance, a quorum call, to get a sense of the lay of the land. How many members are there? Are all 435 elected members in attendance today? If so, that gives you the margins where he can only lose 1 or 2 votes. If for some reason he doesn't, at that point he can call for either a recess to go meet with all Republicans, or they can plow on into the second round and see if he can do it again. Would he horse trade with somebody who held out? Maybe. Or they may just try to continue things for a little while. The other thing to appreciate about today, Elizabeth, especially for really loyal news viewers who watch a lot of our coverage, you're going to get to see some angles there in the House chamber we don't normally see, including the one we're seeing right now, the board there of the votes. Normally, the cameras that control the House chamber are controlled by House leadership, and they don't let us see some of the angles and some of the parts of the House chamber that we are going to see today. They've allowed in C-SPAN cameras to serve as a pool for everybody else, and C-SPAN knows what to look for, so we'll be relying on their services to get us the reactions and other corners of the room. And that'll also start to give us, during the vote, an indication of whether the speaker has this, or if he's in the corner maybe somewhere, arm twisting somebody to be on board with him. So down here in West Palm Beach, we know President-elect Trump is closely monitoring the vote tally. He has been making calls to potential holdouts to try to apply presidential level pressure and remind them that he is standing by the speaker, and those members should as well. This is a test for him too. Right. Remember, before Christmas, he had been calling on the House Republican Conference to pass a short-term spending plan that included raising the debt limit. They flouted that request and have ignored it so far. An early sign that he doesn't have total control necessarily over them. And we'll see today as well whether the last-minute pressure he's putting on a few holdouts works to the speaker's advantage.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of watch this because, Ed, it could kind of be a sign of what is going to happen for the Trump administration moving forward in terms of the kind of his support for the things that he really wants to get passed, right?
Absolutely. The goal is to elect a speaker quickly and easily this afternoon, and then allow Republicans to spend this weekend essentially planning ahead. There are big expectations on the House, especially to get what's called a budget resolution ready, the taxing and spending plans for the federal government that start to lay out the priorities of the Trump administration, how they want to reshape budgetary matters, immigration policy, other elements of domestic policy, maybe start chipping away at some elements of the accomplishments of the Biden years. And, every even-numbered year that a new Congress starts, those first 3 or 4 months are the most ambitious period because it's right when most Americans are expecting them to do things. It's the furthest point away from the next election. And all expectations are that Republican-led House and Senate will move quickly and aggressively to try to get as much done as quickly as possible before the summer, really. They've expanded the schedule. You're going to see a lot more Monday to Friday in the House and the Senate, and that's all at the request and the expectation of President-elect Trump, who wants to see them get things done quickly in terms of spending, in terms of his immigration policy, in terms of tax policy, possibly take up issues like tariffs, and of course over in the Senate get his nominees confirmed as quickly as possible in a more closely divided chamber.
Ed, from my perspective, I remember watching after the election, it seemed like the voices of the Trump loyalists were especially loud and supporting Trump no matter what. From your perspective, does it feel like some of those voices are calming down a little bit as we get closer to Inauguration Day?
Well, are we talking about voters or are we talking about lawmakers in Washington?
Lawmakers.
Because if it's voters, lawmakers, then okay. So, look, what we're going to see a lot of in the coming weeks and months is the fissures or the differences among Republicans on a variety of issues. There are those who, of course, are 1,000% loyal to the president-elect. Whatever he wants, he gets, in their view. That reflects, to some extent, their chamber or their district back home, and the expectations people have placed on that member to be as loyal and as helpful to the president as possible. In other cases, you're going to see some no's on certain issues, or you're going to see some expectations placed on Republican leadership in the White House, that if you want my vote on, for example, tax reform, you may need to reconsider some elements of tax policy in order to get me and 5 or 6 other like-minded members on board. And when the chambers are that closely divided, 4 or 5 votes in the House, depending on how many are actually in office, 3 votes in the Senate, there are a handful of members in both of those chambers, Republicans especially, who will wield special influence on various issues and can go to the Speaker and the President and say, look, I want to be yes with you, but you've got to let me get this win, or you've got to make this change in order to get me there. And if not, you're going to start to see Republicans talk to Democrats. And then it becomes a choice for Democrats. Are there a handful of them, depending on what part of the country they're from and where they represent, where there's an incentive to work with Republicans, or is the incentive to not do that and to stand in opposition? So a lot to be determined, and a lot will play out in the coming weeks, but the focus and the tenor and the shape of Washington changes now and is very much Republican-hued as they take full control and then first have to discuss amongst themselves how to handle these complex issues and see if they can pass them themselves. And this president-elect expects speed and expects unity. And if he isn't getting that, he's not going to be happy with his fellow Republicans.
All right, Ed O'Keefe, always fascinating to talk with you, sir. Thank you so much for that insight.